Hello, beautiful, and welcome back to another episode of Beautiful I Am Colored. My name is Evelyn, and I am the creator of this podcast as well as the book titled Beautiful I Am Colored. As I always tell you each week that I am here, I'm so grateful that you have joined me to hear another week where I share insights and perspectives that I've gained and hope that it brings you some hope and healing as you start your week. Before I begin today, you'll notice, loyal listeners will notice that I did not have a podcast last week. You all know by now that I do have moments where I go what I would call dark. And that is time where, I feel like I'm getting sucked into the social media a little bit too much. So to test myself, I just take a break. So I don't do as many postings, if any. And sometimes I'll take a break off of doing the podcast. Last weekend, one of the main reasons why I took a break is because our family has started a new, family time. As you may know, all of our offspring are young adults now, ranging in age from the oldest, soon to be 29 here, and the youngest will be 23 this year. And so last week, in celebration of my oldest son's birthday, we ordered pizza. I made spinach dip. We had all kinds of snacks and, beverages. And we binge watched The Last Airbender for several hours together, which was so awesome. Like, it was so awesome to do something with them as young adults that we haven't done with them since they were little ones. And so that's what I was doing last Sunday. And honestly, I don't regret it. I hope you all understand the boundaries that I have in place. And I try my best to, I try my very best to model what I talk about on this podcast, including taking breaks from social media, including, spending time with family and things of that nature. So that's why I was out last week. But I am back this week with a short one, but a good one, because we're going to finish binge watching the remainder of The Last Airbender today. But before I begin, I wanted to just take some time out to do shout outs and thank yous for those of you who are new here. That is a time in my podcast, where I shout out a person, place, thing, or idea for which I am grateful. This week's shout out and thank you goes to, I've already shared one with you kind of in the intro, but that is family time. And that looks different depending on the ages of children. If you have no children, if you're far away from family, etc., that can look different for all of us. But I am so grateful for family time because it is so important, especially in the day and time that we live in. And it just fuels you up in a different way. Assuming that you're hanging around the family members that don't trigger you. But it does fill you up in a different kind of way that other things that are less meaningful tend to do. So I'm grateful for family time. The other shout out and thank you I want to give out this week is to sunshine. It is now March. Can you believe it? Already we are in March. Tomorrow is Super Tuesday. This week is Super Tuesday, which is crazy how fast the time is flying by. But in that regard, as the season starts to change across the nation, I'm very grateful for sunshine. We have been blessed the past few days here in Denver to have some gorgeous sunshine, weather in the upper 50s, mid to upper 60s, and it has just been so delightful to soak in the sun. And then the final shout out and thank you for this week goes to a local small business, Level Automotive, which is housed right here in Northeast Park Hill, neighborhood part of Denver in the commercial district or section of Park Hill. And here's a disclaimer here, or let me just provide this transparency. This is a biased shout out because the owner and operator of this business is none other than Marlon Barnes, my husband. And so he launched his own business, left corporate after 20 something years doing that song and dance, and launched out into his baby. And he has been doing a phenomenal job with building his brand slowly but surely. But if you're, in the retail for a used car, a good used car, You want to work with someone who has integrity, who is not going to hustle you, who knows the ins and outs of the business, has 20 plus years of experience in every part of the business, and now has rolled all of that subject matter expertise into their own. I would just encourage you to give him a try. Level Automotive. I'll make sure to link Level Automotive in today's description box for those of you who are interested. Okay, without further delay, I want to get right into today's topic. Now, initially, because I haven't written on my blog in quite some time, but I noticed recently there has been an uptick in people reading what the past blogs that I do have public that I've shared on like Facebook by way of my website. And initially, this was going to start off as me writing about this particular topic that has been on my mind in recent weeks. But I said, you know what? Perhaps I might still write on it. I'm not sure yet. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about the topic of today's podcast, which is beware of hitchhikers and parasites. Now, by title alone, you probably can tell that this is going to be a cautionary type message today. It's going to be a friendly reminder to all of the people who, what can I say? I don't have the exact PC words with me at this moment, but let's just say all the people who are super achieving, overachieving, or people who just simply are breaking out of the mindset, the environments that are no longer conducive to who you are becoming. Here's why I say beware of hitchhikers. So by definition, and this is a loose definition, I did not write this down because, this podcast, I don't do editing on it. And so hitchhikers. By hitchhikers, I think you might know the traditional definition of hitchhikers, right? Is you're on your way somewhere, you might be going on the vicinity that they're going. So, they hitch a ride with you to kind of speed up their journey. Similarly speaking, you want to be aware of people who have this kind of trait where they notice, and a lot of times they notice before you notice. I don't know how that works or why that works, but it is true nonetheless. They notice that you are going somewhere. And even though you may not have arrived at your destination, they can tell that you're going somewhere. And so they hitch up to you. What do you mean, Evelyn, by hitch up to you? All of a sudden, there's interest in wanting to meet with you. There's interest in wanting to have conversations with you. There's interest in all these sorts of things that typically wouldn't be there, but it's because they sense and smell on you that you're going places that they want to come along for the ride too. Even if they don't make it to the final destination that you're making it, at least it gets them closer to where they want to go. This is what I would call somewhat of, how can I say, if you're doing it for charity, that's one thing, right? You just want to help a person out. That's one thing. And I think there's room for that when you are growing. But then there are some folks who this is typically like an abusive type of situation, right? Because there's nothing to be gained on your behalf. There's not going to be any type of reciprocity. It's just, what can you do for them? Similarly, the second group of folks that I call parasites. Now, these folks, historically, I'm sure you know what parasite is, right? It's something, and I'm gonna put this in lay terms because I didn't do a full definition like sometimes I do on this podcast, but I'm gonna put it in lay terms for you today. A parasite is, in this case, it's a person, but usually it's an animate type of object, right? So some type of creature that thrives, and in fact, their lives depend on sucking the life out of you or out of it, whatever it is. You want to be aware of these people, and you know these people, and I'm going to help myself and some of my friends today. You know these people. These people are the type that there absolutely is no reciprocity in the relationship. They only call you when they need something. They only call you when you can make a connection for them. The only time in which that there's any type of interaction where there's something to be gained for them, but it has to come from you. And in that process of them always essentially using you, at the bare foundation, it's them using you, they're always getting fat and full, and you get left depleted. Can I encourage you today to maybe consider reimagining what your life would look like if Hitchhikers and Parasites were no longer a part of your life, and how much more fruitful it will be. But I do realize that sometimes when you are redefining relationships, especially with human beings, there will be what I would call a bucking of the disconnection. By bucking, here's what I mean by that. You know, a wild horse, right? When it's trying to get tamed, at least the little I know, I'm not a horse expert by any stretch of the imagination, but the little I understand about breaking a horse, right? There's a bucking, right? Because they're heavily resistant initially until you break them in. Well, similarly, the breaking of a relationship as it is defined currently, let's just call them Hitchhikers and Parasites, there is going to be some bucking involved. That bucking will translate in the way of lashing out. I just feel like you've changed. I feel like, you're really only focused on yourself. It seems like, you've made kind of a different decision, and, you don't have room in your life for me anymore. Or how about this one? This is for all the folks in the family who reach out to you for money. How about this one? Man, seemed like, you had money to do X, but when I asked you for money to do so-and-so, you didn't have it. All of these types of things and categories fall into the Hitchhikers and what I would call Parasites categories of relationships. And oftentimes, and actually I can't really think of a time where this would be a good thing, except for perhaps to teach a lesson. And please feel free to push back on me on this if you disagree. But just in thinking through it while I'm sharing with you, I think there has to be a time where you go through the pruning process and examining of the relationships that you have. And since we are in spring, and this is the time where you do kind of like spring cleaning, yard cleaning, so that your flowers can come back, so that your trees can grow and, be fruitful and essentially multiply. These things are necessary. I know that as human beings, we don't think that, but there's nothing wrong with redefining friendships and redefining relationships. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it at all. But I think sometimes we have been made to believe that, there should always be the sacrificial lamb, but that comes at an expense. If you're always the person who is giving, and you don't see that reciprocity demonstrated. Now, let me just put a little pin in that about the reciprocity piece being demonstrated. I am fully aware, and I talk about it on this podcast, there are times where you are in a season where you are what Christian folks would call planting seeds, right? Other people might call it charity, where you're just investing because that's the season you're in. So I'm not talking about that. Separate and apart from a season of investing, I do think that it is very healthy to re-examine or examine, if you haven't examined, the relationships that are fruitful and the ones that you want to continue to grow and nurture, and the relationships that are life-sucking from you, that deplete you. You feel exhausted. Your body and your mind feels exhausted when you leave conversations with these type of people, when you have been around them. Like, in fact, it takes a certain amount of energy for you to conjure up to even be in their presence, some of these types of people. So I just want to encourage you today. This is probably not my typical message that I would carry, but nonetheless, I believe in speaking truth, in love, of course, and also in hopes that you are becoming the best you that you can become, as possible. And one of those things that I know that I have been doing in my life is re-examining and reassessing, and I think it's high time that a lot of us do this similar thing, this similar act, even if not the same. With that being said, I hope that today's message did provide you a sense of hope and perhaps healing. I know that it was pretty just right cut to it today, but sometimes that's how I flow. And as always, I want to say thank you. I cannot say that enough. You don't have to listen to me, right? You have much more important things I'm sure that you could be doing with your time. But I certainly don't take it lightly. As always, I want to remind you and remind myself that the future you is waiting on you. Until next week, have a great week, everyone.